Morning Mastery. This is part 2 of Transaction Desk. Part 1, we covered doing the duties owed and the BBRA and kind of walking through it in the Transaction Desk. But as I've seen people do these transactions and kind of go through it with them, I've noticed that we could save a lot of time by creating some templates when you first log in. So when you are doing your transactions, something like the duties owed or the BBRA already has your information in there. So you're not going through entering the brokerage information or anything like that, because these would be pre-populated. Then when you create a transaction, you can just add the already created template and everything would be there for you. And as I say probably a million times, you'll probably get tired of some of the things I say, is that if you have to do something more than once, if you're going to continue to do something, we need to have templates. So this week, we're really focusing on templates throughout our system. So today is Transaction Desk. Tomorrow, we're going to be going through, again, the RPA in Transaction Desk. So we will be creating some templates for that as well, either today or tomorrow, depending on how far we get. And then on Thursday, we will be doing follow-up templates. These will all quicken your process for your follow-ups, even for the actual reach outs you're doing. And also you can create templates for incentives that are out there. So if you know that you just want to plug and play something you've seen or something, an email that you've gotten from a new construction, like Lennar or Woodside, you can take what you've already learned, put it into something like ChatGPT, and have it create a template for you. And then you put that into Follow-Up Boss and you'll be able to send those emails really quick. So this week we are focus on making your lives easier by doing a little bit of work on the front end. And then we can have a lot more speed and consistency in our forms moving forward. So today's session is all about building habits that save you real time in the long run. We want every single transaction to be smooth. And, heaven forbid that we have something like we misspell a name, like Sean's name or Aaron's name, and then it's just going to be kicked back, and we're going to be starting all over again and asking our clients to re-sign documents when all that information should have just been in there automatically. So every minute you spend in any type of repetitive paperwork is a minute you're not spending with your clients. This is inefficient, and this is why all this time adds up really fast. And then when you're trying to do something quickly for a client, you feel rushed, and then that's where mistakes happen. And so it's just much easier to have these all ready. And so something that may take you a half an hour to do, or even 5 minutes to do, could go down to just a minute. And then you also feel secure in the fact that the data is correct. So when you're under pressure, you tend to miss things, misspell things, put things in wrong. But a lot of the times in these contracts and in these documents, data is obviously key. So we want to create habits that don't waste times and they don't introduce risk into our transactions. So the goal is to move faster, but also reduce mistakes. We can always say, I know that form so well, I can write it in my sleep. That's great. But guess what? We're still going to mistype things. We're going to put things in wrong. Your license number could be wrong, or Sean's. It just makes it much easier. But also with these templates, especially like the BBRA, the listing agreement, the duties owed, when you have those templates set up, you can print them, have all your information in the document, and you can keep them in your car or keep them at your house or bring them in folders when you're doing open houses. You won't even have to think about it. You can just go into your templates, print them out. So when you're out there and you're talking to people, you know that if you can sign them, they're right there and they're correct. So that's another thing about templates, is not just moving them through Transaction Desk into DocuSign, but also being able to print them, know that they're clean. And the only thing that you're doing at that point is putting your client's information in, putting an address in, and maybe putting in some dates based on the client's discussion with you about if it's a listing agreement or an RPA. So this will also be consistent. So when someone looks at a form from a lessee, And it is, David's doing it. Those forms from David are going to be in the same consistency as when Lauren does it or Jessica does it. When someone sees something from Alessi, we're setting a precedence that our documentation is correct. Now, we all feel like we're working independently, but we also are working for an agency that has a reputation. So when we actually build ourselves into that reputation and we are consistently doing things correctly, that gives us a professional standard. And when people and other agents work with us, they know when they get something from us that they can feel confident that our paperwork is clean and complete. And so it's really a good place to start when you're actually going into those transactions. So what are we doing today? We are learning how to set yourself up. So once you can see us walk through this demo, because I know you guys, I love demos and these live workshops, because as we go, please raise your hand, please ask questions. Because when you leave here, when you're out of this training, I want you to be able to go and set these up for yourself. You always have the recording to go back to, but if you're at home right now or you're on your laptop, bring up Transaction Desk and do this along with us. So that way you can feel even more confident at the end of the day. So let's set ourselves up for success and really getting the flow of Transaction Desk. Because once you learn this, it is such a superpower because if we know where to go in Transaction Desk, there's hundreds of forms. If you know what you're touching and you know when your templates are set up and you look at this huge list of documents, it will actually have a green mark on it of how many templates you already have set up. So as you scroll through 100 of these documents, you'll see which ones you have templates for. And so it almost minimizes the whole list down to what you use in a consistent way. So this small thing, it seems really small, has a very significant impact on what you do. It's a foundation. You know that when you go into these, your information is correct. The brokerage information is correct. Aaron's name is correct. The phone numbers are right. The email addresses are right. We all know that Kathy helps us when it comes down to John signing the brokerage side of agreements. So her email address or their email address should be in there. So we're not waiting for when Sean's in the office or when something's happened. We know that we have a backup. We know that that's going to someone and that it's going there correctly. So this will obviously save a lot of time. And you'll have this in the system forever. If something changes, you can go in, update your template, and then you don't have to worry about that one small thing that changes in the future. So you have that sheet that you can constantly update, and that will carry you through all your future transactions. So the old way, and where I'm seeing a lot of people do this, is you open the form, you start a transaction, you add the documents, you manually enter your info, and then you repeat this over and over again. This way, we open a template, the basics are pre-filled, and then you add deal-specific details. Now you're confident, and then you reuse the same template next time. So a one-time setup, you will have to maintain them, but if only things change, like if a brokerage name or an email address or a phone number, yeah, you will have to change that. But you will be maintaining this in one area. And then you'll be able to set up your transactions in a very clean way. So what can you pre-fill? Your name, your license number, your broker's details. They should be on every form. Contact information. You're going to have to fill these in for your clients, but your phone, email, fax can all be pre-filled. So you know that they can always reach you correctly. Now, common clauses and default. So when we do like an RPA or we do a listing agreement, there's standard contingency language and preferred inspections points and default terms. Does that stop us from having that conversation with clients? No. but it allows you to have at least the standards in place. And then as we learn the documents better, like the RPA, we know what we need to discuss. But at least there won't be blanks. There won't be things that we miss just because we're in a hurry. And then frequently used fields. So we want to go through, and we're going to go through these documents and really think about each field and say, can we make this a default? Okay, so why this matters. We can write offers faster, we have cleaner paperwork, and we have less stress on active deals. Hopefully, when we get to the point in all of your guys' business, is that you're not going to be working on just one deal. You won't be able to focus just on one. You're going to have other ones you have to maintain. You're going to have to be writing more than one offer. You're going to have to be looking at creating more than one BBRA. You're going to have different people across things, and you're going to have to make sure that you're organized. Now, will this protect you from every single mistake? No, but it will give you some foundation that will give you a lot of confidence in the fact that at least your information is correct, that people know how to reach you if there is something wrong, and that you don't have to start from the beginning each time. So we are going to go over to the transaction desk now, and we're going to pull up some forms. We're going to pre-fill basics, save it as templates, and then we'll go through and hopefully have time to use it in a transaction. So I am going to go into my MLS here. So when you log in, it brings you to this screen. It says, good morning, wonderful. We typically live right here in the matrix, but we're going to be going into transaction desk today. So typically what most agents do is they create a transaction, and then you add the forms to the transaction. What we're going to do today is, instead of entering a new transaction, we're going to go to the forms, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 down, and it looks like a piece of paper. Now we're going to go into residential forms. So as you can see, I kind of said that there's like it's not green, I apologize, it's blue, and it tells you how many numbers of forms that you actually have in there and that you've saved. So for this one, I did an addendum to a listing agreement, a coming soon listing. So I have one template saved. And if you go scroll through on my list, I have one buyer brokerage representation agreement. So I actually have one template already saved. And same thing with duties owed. So you can have more than one template. Here I have 2. Here I have 1. Here I have 3. So you could set them up in different ways. So you could have 3 different templates, or 2, or whatever number, for different types of scenarios. But you just have to keep track of what those scenarios are. So in my case, I had 3 different types of scenarios where I had to do an exclusive authorization to sell or lease. And so I like to keep 3 templates. But what we're going to do today is we're going to start probably the simplest one, and we're going to do the duties owed by Nevada. Now you can select more than one that you want to do a template form. So you could click here, and then you could click another one down like here, and you can say, okay, I want both of these forms to come up because I'm going to create templates. We're going to do these one at a time just for simplicity and for just ease of use, but you can do that. You can go through and say, okay, here's all the forms that I want to create templates for, select them all and go through them. When you're first doing this, let's keep it simple and do one at a time until you're really comfortable with this process. So I'm going to start with duties owed by Nevada real estate licensees selling side. So that's the buyer. Then I will tell you up here how many you've chosen. And you can print a blank form. And again, you can go back down to these ones. But in this case, I am going to just do duties owed. Where's my check mark? And I'm going to click on the form. So I already have one here, but I am going to add. I'm going to create a new standalone form. This is going to be your form. No, it's not tied to any transaction. So the licensee on the transaction is going to be you, unless you're filling this out for someone else, and then they should be doing it on theirs. But in most cases, it's going to be your name. Then it's always going to be your name, and then it's going to be your license number. Things that typically you're not going to know off the top of your head. I know some of you know your license number, and that's beautiful, but I don't know mine off the top of my head. Now, these are the areas you're going to leave blank. Unless you're working with the same client over and over and over again, like let's say Jessica is going to be working with a client that buys flips. That's all they do. They're doing it over and over and over again. That's a good template to create. But in most cases, this is going to be blank. Because this is a seller agreement, we're going to click buyer because it's not a listing duties owed. It's a seller duties owed. So that in that case, it's a buyer. The brokerage should be our brokerage. So it's going to be Life Realty. Oh, sorry. This is supposed to be the name of the person. So this is going to be Sean, whose company is Life Realty District. Are there additional licenses involved in your transaction? Now, if you're pre-licensed, you can actually say at this point, I'm going to have a default in here where I'm going to have other licensees involved in my transaction. So you could have a template where you click yes, because right now for the next 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to have someone that is going to be helping you. In most cases, this is not going to be one that you fill out, but let's just say like right now, Jessica doesn't have her license. So let's say we decide that every transaction is going to involve my license. So she could have a template and click this yes. If you are licensed, typically you're going to hit no, unless it's like a special occasion. Let's just say if you're working a commercial transaction and you don't have a commercial license, or you're working with Aaron on a short sale or something that he's going to have to actively participate in. So just keep in mind that this might not be something you select on a template, but it is something you can create if you are working a lot of times with another agent. Now, at this point, that's it. All you're really doing is making sure this part of it is filled out. That is duties owed. So you can hit save and exit. And it's going to add that number that we saw in our list. Like I had 1. Now I'm going to have 2. So once you hit save and exit, now I have 2 duties owed. And when I go back to my list, and I go down to duties owed, it says I have 2 here. That's how you keep track of how many are in there. And you can always delete them out. Don't think that if you create a template now that is completely, right now it looks perfect. Jessica is like, all my duties owed are going to look this way because I'm going to have Trina as a helper on it. And then I'll create another one down the line. You don't have to create another one. Like Jessica, once she gets licensed, could go into here and update the template she already had. So if things change, you just have to maintain them. So the next one we're going to take through is the BBRA, because you guys should know this one like the back of your hand. Oh, and I'm going to go back. So this is a template that I've already completed, but we're still going to go through so you can see how it looks. So the buyer brokerage residential agreement, when I brought this up and it was blank, neither one of these were checked. I created a template that says exclusive. Now, our template should always say exclusive. Because if we do not check this and we leave this blank, you do not have an exclusive agreement. So this is a really nice thing to have as a template because this will take off the guesswork or the missing of this. Someone signs and now they're not really committed to you. And it's a checkbox. It's easier to miss. Now, as my template, I have residential. I have never worked in any of these. I hope to. Well, I did work with New Home. But you can actually have a template that actually has all these checked that you work with, and you can just uncheck them. Or you can have a residential, an investment BBRA, a new home BBRA, etc. Because let's just say it is an investment property. Maybe you always say 1, 2, 3 in the other description. Maybe that's just the way you do business. So in those cases, you should have separate BBRAs. If you always know that when you do vacant land, you write in the description, parcel number 1, 2, 3, 4, this is going to be a vacant land. They have to purchase it together with someone else's land. Anything like that, you should be putting into a template. Now, under my applicable cities, because I don't know where my buyers are going to buy, I just put Las Vegas and surrounding areas. That typically covers everything. If you want to have a template that says Las Vegas and have another one that says North Las Vegas and another one that says Pahrump, go for it. Or if you want to list out your cities individually where you like to work, you absolutely can do that. I don't limit it because I just never know where my buyer's going to go. Now, the length of agreement you can fill in. But no, typically you're not going to want to do that because the length of agreement is going to be based on the client. And if you pre-fill this in, you could be only locking them in for a couple days, depending on what you pre-fill in here. So this is a good example of what not to fill in a template. So you want to leave the length of agreement open, or you can do it based, you could just say December of the end 2026. Let's say you always do it for the rest of the year. That's a reason to put it in. But just keep in mind that next year, you're going to need to make sure you change that template. But if you want to default in that I cover everybody up until the end of a year, that's a good way to do it. Now, you're the gross purchase price of property, your commission. I default in mine at 3. Now, if you guys are all working separately, if you want to be 2.5, or you want a 1% template, a 2% template, etc., feel free. This is the most common one for me. So I put this in and I check the box. If you only charge a certain amount of commission and you don't use a percentage, let's say no matter what size the house, you charge $5,000 in commission. You can hit exactly and put in 5,000 and that's your template. I default this in right here, the $795, because that's our broker fee. And I default that in as they have to pay it, as the buyer has to pay it. And I check this. Now, these things can change when you negotiate. So if someone says they sign your BBRA and they change their mind, they are looking for a house, but they only will now pay you 2%. That's fine. But up front, we should be asking for our standard percentage and our standard broker fee. So that doesn't mean they're completely locked in, but that also establishes the fact that they are giving you a commission. Can that be negotiated later? Yes, but they need to make sure that they realize when they sign exclusively with you that they are agreeing that if the actual deal goes completely to the end, if a purchase agreement is signed, if escrow is closed, that you're expecting this amount. That is the agreement. If it changes in between, that can be an addendum. But I always suggest on your templates that you put your standard commission here, whether that's a percentage or an exact figure. If you typically pay for the brokerage fee, you can leave this blank. You don't have to put this in there as someone pays for it. My standard with my business is the buyer or the seller pays the brokerage fee of $7.95. Now I know some agents charge a lower amount, like they'll say that they pay $5.95, and then you cover the $200 on your end. Or some people say if the broker fee is $1,000, the buyer or seller has to pay it, and then they pocket the $205. So that's how you're setting up your business. I can make suggestions, but how you fill this out is really on you. Because when it comes down to it, is that you want to be doing things fairly and you want to be transparent. But this can come back and also bite you if you're actually trying to collect money that is not fair, or if it's just not in agreement with what they thought that they were signing. So keep this reasonable, guys. Like I said, this is what I do, and that's my standard template. But think about this on your own and how you want to structure your business. I default this one in number 8. That the buyer's property to 0 other agreements. So they're exclusive to me. But if they say I have 2 other non-exclusive agreements, you can change this number. But I default it to 0 because my assumption is that they're only working with me. Now the buyer, this needs to say blank because you're not going to know that. But down here, this information can actually be changed. So the licensee should be you. That should be in your template. Your license number should be in your template. Your phone number should be in your template. Your email address. The signature will have to remain blank, the date and time, because that's when you actually sign it. The company should already be in your template. In this case, I actually defaulted this at Alessi Realty at Life Realty District. You can have that. That's not a problem. Or you can just put Life Realty District. The broker is Sean Emenden. The broker license is already there. The signature obviously needs to say blank. But all of these things are in my template. So I don't have to rewrite this. I don't need to assume that, I don't have to think, or I don't have to assume whether this is correct or not. So all of these should be able to be defaulted into your template. Now, when you save and exit, you know that everything that you can fill out is already in here. And then you can hit save and exit. Now you have your template here. And if you go back to your forms, it's also going to be down here that I have one template. So as you scroll through here, really think about what you've actually done before, or what happens a lot, what comes up. Choose those templates, and then as you move through your career, you're going to have, more and more transactions. So let's say you start with the BBRA and the duties owed. Those are common for buyers, but as you move through your career, you're going to have listings. So let's just take Art. Art has only dealt with buyers, but now he has a brand new listing. He's doing this over again. He's never done a listing agreement. So the thought process is, I have a new transaction. I can start with a new transaction here at the transaction desk, or step back a little bit and say, I've never done this before. Let me go see what forms I need, and let's create templates of everything I can fill out. Then I'll go and create a new transaction, bring in my template, and just put in my client's information. That sounds like more work, right? But the next listing that Art gets, he knows his templates are already set up for a listing. So he doesn't have to start from scratch. If he didn't create those templates, he'd be going back, looking for the right form, back, putting his information in, and he'll be doing the same thing that he could have done with that first transaction that he did, but he's doing it again and again and again. So you may think it takes longer up front, but just doing it up front once saves you in the future. So keep in mind that as you look at these documents and you say, I've only dealt with buyers. That's great. So all you've done is you've worked with the duties owed for a buyer, the BBRA for the buyer. That's it. And you've done an RPA. But guess what? There's going to be a time that you're going to have a listing. That comes up as soon as you know that that is a new transaction for yourself. The first thought we should have is let's bring up a form. Instead of creating a transaction, let's bring up the form first, or the forms, and let's see what I can put in without the client's information, without anything. Then I will go create a new transaction and I will bring in my template. That will save you so much time in the long run because you know you've already filled it out. You know that you've taken the time and you weren't rushed when you did it the first time. So just keep in mind, every new thing that you do, you have the opportunity to save you time in the long run. So I really want to go through the RPA real fast because we're going to be covering the RPA tomorrow. And I would like to put in some information on what we look at for the residential purchase agreement. So we are just looking at the RPA as what we can put into the template today. We are not going to be putting in all the mathematics. We're not going to be going over that. We're just thinking from a template perspective. Tomorrow, we will go back over the math, what makes sense from contingencies and all of that. So try not to get too deep into what every field is right now, because we are spending a lot of time on the RPA over weeks and weeks to make sure that we all understand it correctly. So we're just focusing on can I create my template. So we want to bring up the form. And even if you don't have a transaction yet, guys, let's just say you are brand new. You're a brand new agent. You haven't done a buyer or a seller or anything like that. If you have the time when you're training to go in here and get into the transaction desk and start creating your templates, please do so. Or if you've never had templates before, you don't have to have a transaction to start the process of learning these forms. The better you know them, the way better you're going to feel when you see them. When a brand new thing is introduced and you have it and it's right in front of you, it doesn't matter if you saw it a couple months ago or it feels like you've never seen it before. You have to go through and understand it. So the more and more you see these and the more you understand them and the more you can explain them to your clients, the better you're going to build your business. Nobody wants to have an agent where they pull out an agreement and they ask questions, an agent that doesn't know what things mean. So if you have no transactions under your belt, if you are brand new to the industry, if you have access to the transaction desk, you should be spending at least, I would say, an hour a week just looking at the forms. And now that I'm training you on templates, you should be going through every one of those documents and thinking, where can I make my life easier? Let me open up this document. Let me see what it says. Can I put my name in it? Can I put my license number in it? Think of it just about putting your side of the deal in every one of these forms. You yourself as the agent, the brokerage, Aaron, or even if you're working a commercial transaction in the future and you're working with a commercial real estate agent on the life realty side, you can still pull out that agreement, put in your information. It's not going to hurt. And even if you put in information and then you say, maybe I didn't do that right, or maybe I have to look this over with Trina or Aaron, we can look it up. We can pull up the template right on your screen and say, and you can walk us through, okay, here was my thought process. And we can update that template and then hit save and exit, and it's there for you. So you can't break this. What you can break is when you're doing something and you're rushing through it and the information is not there or is incorrect, we now have a broken cog in the wheel. Now we have to go back and we have to fix the mistake. So wherever you can make your life easier, let's do that now when you're not rushing through a transaction. So this is the residential purchase agreement, or RPA. Most of the stuff up here, you're not going to be able to enter. This is all about who the buyer is, what the property is, where it's located, what they're doing with the property. This is financial terms. Most of this you're not going to be able to fill in. Now, when we do training on this, we have gone through that some of these things are extremely rare, extremely, like the promissory note. If you see this in your careers, it's going to be shocking. Scott was in here the other day and we were going over this. He said in the last 30 years, he's never seen this. To save yourself time and those things that are rare, just fill them out. If it's a rare case, guys, you're going to know this is going to be a totally different form than I've ever filled out because this is the weirdest situation. So on the things that are going to be rare, absolutely fill them out. It's one less field you have to think about. So like the promissory note here, this is extremely rare. So put the 0 in there. Then as you go through, I really want you guys to think, where can I put this in to make it easy? This is the commission. So you're going to typically always get 3% or a certain amount. You can fill that in, make it a standard part of your agreement. Then some of these financial contingencies are typical. Now, I don't have a problem with putting these typical dates in. The only thing I'm wary about with some of the newer agents, or this is a new process for some agents, is remember, you still have to discuss it. If you put dates in here, it does not mean you don't discuss it. So if you feel confident that you will go in here and have a responsible discussion with your client, then put them in here. If you feel like, you know what, I have to discuss it, this is where I would put things like if you were new. Like you could put discuss or a shortened one or client or something like that, or something that draws your attention so you know you have to talk about it. You can put something like that, something that draws your attention so you don't have the days in there or you don't have none in there, but you have something that will remind you to discuss with your client, like something like that. Talk to client. So you know that this is not supposed to be simple, that you have to have a discussion with your client. If that's going to help you when you're new, absolutely, because this RPA will not go any further if you have that in there, and you'll know, okay, I have to talk to someone about it. Now, if you are very familiar with the RPA and you know that there's going to be standards and you know there's going to be discussion, you can put numbers in here. But just keep in mind that if you're not totally familiar with it and you leave a default in here, it goes through and it gets approved. If those dates aren't right, you better be watching them like a hawk. And if something needs to be extended or shortened or changed, you better be on those addendums like no other. So what I suggest for a lot of the newer agents, either leave these blank or put something in here that will remind you to talk to your client. So you could put typical things in here, like, hey, this is 28 days. The appraisal contingency is usually in 21. The cash purchase with this is in a certain amount of days. The low contingency, let's just say, is 30 days. You can put standards in here. I don't have a problem with that as long as you're talking to your client. Now, if it were me and I was brand new, I would put something like Bill. So when I go through, if someone gets this RPA, let's say you send this over to the listing agent and you just have Bill in there, they're not going to approve it. They're going to send it back to you. So at least it won't go over with wrong dates. But we also want to set a good impression. So we want to make sure that we're filling this out. So as we get more experienced, I would say put the typical dates in there. And then know that you need to go through every section of this with your client. If it doesn't make sense to put anything in here for you, for how your brain operates, then leave it blank. For me, I like to have things in my template, and now that I've done transactions, I typically put the dates that are standard in here. Then fixtures and personal property, you're not going to be able to put in. You're not going to be able to put the property address. You're not going to be able, now here, actually, this is a great spot to put your templates. So, opening of escrow. We want to use our company. We want to use Landmark. So, in my templates, I put our partnership companies, our ancillaries, into these fields. So it automatically will go to them unless someone comes back and says, no, you can't use that. Okay. So I put Landmark title in here and I put Annie. Obviously put their full name here. Yeah, Stewart. And so that way I don't have to think about this. The title company we use and our escrow officer should be automatically in your template. Now, close of escrow, you can't fill out. We don't know what that is. So, due diligence. When we talked about this pretty extensively, I probably warned you guys out about it, but the standard due diligence period is 10 days. That's standard, and that's pretty much for almost anything. I'm actually okay with this, putting the typical number of days in here. But it doesn't mean we don't want the discussion, because we want the client to understand what due diligence is. Because once they submit their EMD, their earnest money deposit, if they don't do the inspection, ask for repairs, and those things within due diligence, they lose that ability. They can't ask for repairs after due diligence. And that means you also need to make sure you coordinate that. You coordinate the inspection and those due diligence conditions. So if you do it outside the 10 days and there is something wrong with that property, one, they can't request any type of repair. Well, they can, but they probably won't get it approved. And after 10 calendar days, if they choose to cancel, let's just say the inspection, you didn't schedule it. The inspection went too long, nobody did it. On the 11th day, the inspection happens. It comes back, the roof is bad. It needs complete repairs. So now the buyer wants a repair. Well, it's outside the 10 days. So the seller doesn't have to agree with it. due diligence is passed. But then the buyer wants to back out. Guess what? They could lose their EMD. So even though the standard is 10 calendar days, and usually that's plenty, it doesn't mean we don't need the discussion. And the buyer needs to understand that they can't ask for repairs and have it automatically be considered. That inspection needs to be done. If they want to be here for the inspection, I don't suggest that, but if they want to be in the inspection, and let's say they're out of state, they need to be in state and be there for the inspection within 10 calendar days, get the inspection back, ask for repairs. Because after those 10 calendar days, if they back out, most likely they're going to lose that EMD, the earnest money deposit. That could be $1,000 or $50,000, depending on the cost of the home. So I put 10 calendar days in my template. Just be wary of having that discussion, but still, it's usually a very good amount of time to get those things done. And an addendum can be done at a later date. You just got to stay on top of it. Now, what else can we put in here? So, inspections. Everybody loves this area because it can get quite confusing about what you want to put in here, whether it's seller, buyer, 50-50, waived, or NA. This is where I think a template is great because usually you're going to stick with certain things. The home inspection is going to be paid by the buyer. If you're representing the buyer, the home inspection is paid by the buyer. Now, that should be standard. Now let's go through and see anything that's not applicable. Is there a pool or spa? If there's not, then that's not applicable. Yeah, there's a roof. Yeah, there's some of these are going to be standard. Is there a wood burning device? If there's none, not applicable. So you start up with home inspection. That's defaulted as a buyer. Then I want you to go through the whole list and put what's not applicable. What they absolutely don't have in that house. So if they have city septic tank, it's going to be not applicable. Septic plumbing, it's not applicable. Septic inspections, not applicable. If it's not a well, your guys are not going to be dealing with wells unless you're going out to Pahrump or way out in the boonies. Okay, guess what? They have water. No matter what, they have water. Okay, so skip that. Do they have soil? Yes. Do they have surveys? Yes. Can there be fungus? Yes. Do they have air? Yes. There could be radon? Yes. Lead-based testing. Anything after 1978, I mean, I could think before 1978, you have to do lead-based testing. Is there an elevator? Most of the time, that's going to be not applicable. That's what want you guys to do first. Most of this right here is going to be not applicable. The only thing that would be iffy would be pool or spa. So if you want to leave those ones blank for your templates, absolutely. You are not going to see something with a septic tank or well or an elevator unless it's it's very rare. Or if it's a brand new build in the middle of nowhere and they're going to have a septic tank and they're going to have a well. And trust me, if that happens, we're going to be in a whole nother level of being an agent for someone. So we're going to have assistance on that one, especially on our first one. So this is what I would put in my templates. Now, what I also put in my templates is typically I put on most of these waived. Now, why am I putting waived when they have all of this? Just by default, right? They have plumbing, they have a structure. Now, the reason why I put this is because in most cases, you're going to have waived on a lot of these. It doesn't mean the buyer is waiving inspection. or the seller is waiving inspection. Take some time and read this whole paragraph. You have the right to inspect anything. So even if you put waived, it doesn't mean that you don't get it inspected. It means that it's part of the home inspection. And if something comes back that is serious in the roof, in the HVAC, in the electrical system, in the plumbing or sewer, in the structural inspection, the home inspection is going to cover all of that. And once the inspection is done, if the buyer wants more inspection, like I had one where it came back that there was water in the crawl space underneath the roof. So the RPA said waived right here. But the inspection said that they were concerned about the roof. So they suggested a roofing contractor. So we sent a roofing contractor out and did another inspection. It does it. So you're allowed to do further inspection based on the home inspection. So since we don't know whether it's a pool or spa, we don't know if there's any fireplaces, we don't know if they're going to want termites. They may, based on the home inspection. They may want pests. We don't know. Based on the home inspection, we may want water quality. Based on the home inspection, we may want soil. Based on the inspection, we may want a survey. So this is what your template at the end of the day should look like. Then you fill in if it has a pool, it has a wood burning device, does it need lead-based paint testing if it's before 1978? If you find one that has an elevator, then you change this. If somebody has a septic, you change this. But this is what your template should look like. And I know there's a lot of questions about this section of it, because it seems weird to say waived, waived, waived. When it comes down to it, if you think about years and years and years ago, before home inspection was what it was today, these had to be separated, because a home inspection did not mean that it was checking the roof. It was checking the HVAC. It's checking the electrical, the plumbing. Today's home inspection is 50, 60 pages long. And at the end of it, it tells you, I see a problem, but I can't diagnose the problem. So I suggest this. At the very end of their suggestions, they tell you, I see a problem. You need to go get a better qualified professional to come see this. And so putting waived here, it will feel funky the first time. But I'm telling you right now, it does not come back to bite you. I've never had one rejected based on this. And when it comes down to it, if you really dig into this, feel free to chat GPT it. It basically says that you have every right as a buyer to inspect anything during your due diligence. It doesn't matter what this says. Now, where this could change is if you're talking to your buyer and they say up front that I want a separate roof inspector and I want the seller to pay for it. The roof seems funky to me. I don't care. We don't want to say waived. I want the roof to be paid, the inspection to be paid for, and it's going to be by the seller. Then you would change it. By default, though, I would keep it just like this. And then as we move on, you're going to get to title, escrow, appraisal fees. The escrow fees are going to get paid by the buyer. The real property transfer Who owns the real property right now? The seller does. So they would pay for the transfer tax. Lender, who's getting the lending? The buyer. Who's getting the appraisal? The buyer. Who owns the property? The seller. So that's how I want you to think about it. There's escrow fees because the buyer is buying the property. There's real property tax because the seller owns the property. That's their real property. The lender is only the lender because the buyer is lending the money. I mean, the lender is lending the money to the buyer. There's only an appraisal because there's lending. So that's because of a buyer. The owner of the property needs to make sure that they pay for, because they pay for the title policy because they're the current owner. So if you think about it that way, this part of it will be really simple, but once you have a template, you won't have to think about it again. Closing fees, you're not going to know. You may know a percentage, but that can change. Sometimes a closing fee is 3% of the total purchase price, but I wouldn't default that in. So then there's a home protection plan that can be waived, or we actually can choose our home protection. Now, what I like to do is I put our ancillary, our partner, in here. So this is American Home Warranty. So I just default that in. It doesn't mean that they're actually purchasing one. I just put in our partner. And then up here, you can choose that the buyer wants or requires, buyer waives or requires. If they waive it, it doesn't matter if this is here. It doesn't at all. So just put our partner's name there. If they require it, great, require it, but I don't default that in. Now, here is where the seller pays for the home warranty or the buyer. You're filling this out for the buyer. So a lot of times they want the seller to pay for it, but I don't default that in, and I don't default in the price. Those are all negotiable things when you do this. Now, CIC is the HOA. So if the house doesn't have an HOA, CIC is not going to be applicable. Okay, so the CIC demand is going to be paid for by the seller. They currently own the property. They're responsible for the HOA, and they're also responsible for giving you the information for the HOA. So the CIC demand is a full packet from the HOA with its all the documentation, all the reserves it has, all the things that an HOA is required to do as its own kind of separate company. So that would be the seller. The seller is the one that does the capital contribution right now, and it is their responsibility to do the transfer. Now, if there's a final inspection fee from the HOA, that would be on the seller as well. So this is all HOA related. Now we're getting down to disclosures. So we always want the seller real property disclosure form with the SRPD. We always want to make sure that we have construction default disclosure. Lead-based paint, I just select from my templates. It can always be waived because if it's after 1978, it doesn't really matter, but I automatically default that for my templates. These I leave blank because we don't know if it's a smart home and we don't know if there's solar. Then right here, I get a lot of this, like how many calendar days should a buyer is entitled to, like how many days do they have prior to close of escrow to do a final walkthrough. This should be 1 day, guys. Do not give 7, do not give a ton of days. We want them to look at the property right before close of escrow. Because if they look at it 7 days before, they walk the property, it's perfect. In 7 days, anything can happen. So give them, they need to walk the property 1 day before close of escrow. That should be your standard. So that should be in your template. Delivery of possession. So this is when they get their keys, they get their alarm codes, garage codes. This should be close of escrow. If it changes, you can put it here, but in 99.9% of the cases, they should not be getting their keys until close of escrow. And then the rest of this is pretty much going to need to remain blank. Until you go to here. This is where you're going to have Sean's information, your information, and these should automatically be defaulted. This is going to have to be blank because this is about the seller's information and that can change. And then this is the seller's signature. So everything I've gone through up here should automatically be in your template for the RPA. So those are 3 documents that you should have in your arsenal now in your templates. You will use these documents over and over and over and over again. So if you don't have these 3, you're doing yourself a disservice. When we cover this again, we'll probably go onto the selling side more, but this is basically on the buying side of getting your templates together, even though you're going to still be using the RPA and the duties owed for sellers as well. So I hope that you guys really look at this, go back and watch the recording and create these 3 templates by the next time I see all of you, because it will come up. If you guys have one-on-ones with me, it will come up. Do you have your templates created? And then go through and do more and more of them so you can get familiar with them. All right, well, that's the end of today. Does anybody have any questions? All right, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for coming. And I will see you on Success Floor. Oh, thank you for, I hope the new mic was good.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Dorothea.
So where it says escrow fee, I always put 50-50.
You do 50-50 on escrow fees?
I sure do, and I get it every time.
Okay, well, that's absolutely, you can do that.
Okay. All right, just wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing anything wrong.
No,
Okay, that's
you
it.
can absolutely run your business how you want to do it. I usually do this. But again, if you are getting 50-50 and that's your standard, absolutely do that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Uh-huh. All right, thank you guys. I'll see you on Success Board.
Thank you.